In today's brief video, I want to take a moment and discuss the importance of getting blood work done on yourself somewhere between 90 and 120 days after you've quit smoking weed. And I would encourage you to get a pen and paper for today's video because I'm going to talk about the exact labs that we recommend to our clients and our patients when we're doing this type of blood work. It's out of the ordinary that your primary care physician probably normally orders for you. Now, if you're new to the channel, my name's Dr. Frank. I'm the founder of AddictionMindset Recovery Coaching. Our programs focus on helping people quit addictions I once struggled with: nicotine, THC, energy drinks, and adult media content. So a few things prior to discussing the actual blood work itself. Point number one, I recommend getting blood work somewhere between 90 and 120 days out, because if you were to order blood work when you first quit, like right off the bat or within those first 2 weeks of quitting, you have to remember your body's going through withdrawal, your body's going through a detox process, it's going through a healing process, and that can impact certain blood work markers and blood work levels, and it can skew them unfairly. So we always recommend waiting to about that 90 and 120 day mark when you've, completed that full detox process. And more importantly, it's usually around 90 to 120 days where you have more of a firm grasp on your sobriety process. The last thing we'd want to do is do blood work in the first 2 weeks when you're still very fragile, perhaps in your early sobriety, wind up finding some bad news, tell the person some bad news about their blood work, and then have them go relapse because of that. Another reason why it's really important to get blood work done in that time frame is because if you're still struggling with, let's say, withdrawal symptoms, or if you're still struggling with fatigue or muscle pain or stomach problems, we have to start to ask ourselves, okay, were you smoking weed to self-medicate for some other type of medical condition? And we want to start to investigate that, because if you've been self-medicating for pain or for a thyroid disorder or for, some, low blood sugar levels, and that was your energy problems, we want to find that out and we want to start to address that to prevent relapse in the future. Now, when it comes to ordering blood work, there's very specific tests that I recommend. So if you haven't already, get that pen and paper and start to write these things down, because we're going to talk a little bit about them. And I'm going to tell you guys how these things can add up to kind of paint a bigger picture. So the first thing we recommend, and I'm reading this right off a script here that we would give to our patients, comprehensive metabolic panel. So we want to look at your liver function. We want to look at your kidney function. We want to look at your electrolyte levels. This is super important in people who have been struggling with cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. We want to look at a lipid panel. So this is your HDL, your LDL, your good cholesterol, your bad cholesterol, your triglyceride levels. We want to look at maybe your very low density lipoproteins, your VLDL. This is a marker for kind of heart health. But in our world, kind of the alternative medicine world, I'm actually more concerned with people who have too low of cholesterol, because that might be negatively impacting their hormone levels, because cholesterol is the building block for many of your hormones like testosterones and estrogens and progesterones and all of that fun stuff. So I'm always very curious about cholesterol, and cholesterol can kind of give us an idea of this person's lifestyle, maybe of their genetics or their nutritional behaviors. Now, the next thing I would recommend is a complete blood count, a CBC with a differential. This is going to look at your red blood cells, your white blood cells, neutrophils, basophils. This is a really good panel to start to rule out any type of autoimmune disease or any other scary disease processes that may be out there. So really important to get this done. This can also help us identify things like anemia. So if someone's constantly fatigued after they've been, quit smoking weed or quit an addiction, we want to rule out anemia, because maybe we could simply correct that with an iron-based supplement, or, a B12 supplement, or perhaps it's, something that's to be treated with medication. This is a big one. A lot of people will self-medicate with cannabis for pain control, for stomach problems, for chronic fatigue issues, myalgia, muscle pain. And a test that we like to look at if someone's suffering with this is called an ANA with a differential or with a reflex on it. ANA is a screen for autoimmune disease. And there's a lot of people out there who are suffering with autoimmune diseases that are undiagnosed. So we want to look at an ANA test to get an idea if perhaps this person has some type of underlying autoimmune disease, Lyme disease, rheumatoid arthritis, or Jones disease, lupus. It starts to give us an idea of this person's, autoimmune profile. So an ANA is a big one that I like to do with people if they have symptoms that would indicate it's something we should do. Another value that I like to recommend getting is your HbA1c. So this is your average blood sugar levels over the last 3 months. It gives you an average of those in your HbA1c. This is super important because if someone's been smoking weed and their nutrition has been poor, I'm worried about hyperglycemia, so type 2 diabetes, prediabetes, if they've been gaining weight. Or if they've lost a lot of weight, I'm worried about hypoglycemia, low blood sugar levels over a period of time. And this is something that can often be corrected with nutritional changes. And again, like the lipid panel, as a provider, someone who's ordering blood work and interpreting it, this gives me a really good insight into a person's lifestyle and perhaps genetic predisposition to things. I always like to check homocysteine and HSCRP. These are markers in the body for inflammation. Typically, we think of them in regard to cardiac health, but these can be general markers of an inflammatory process that's occurring. This is very common with people who are struggling with GI issues. This is common for people who have had a poor diet, who aren't exercising, who aren't getting sunlight throughout the day, who aren't sleeping well. We usually see very high markers of inflammation, and this is definitely something we want to look into after we quit smoking weed or quit an addiction. I do like to check insulin levels, especially if the person is struggling with obesity. If it's a female who's having symptoms of potentially PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and she's been self-medicating with cannabis, we're gonna look into insulin levels to rule out PCOS because perhaps we missed that diagnosis and she's been self-medicating this whole time. And when I say self-medicating, guys, I understand that cannabis is a great form of medication for many disease processes. I'm talking though about the person where the benefits of self-medicating have been overrun by the consequences of addiction. That's what we're talking about here. Iron and TIBC, we want to check that out, make sure there's no anemias. Magnesium is a really big one. We got a lot of people, guys, who struggle with insomnia months after quitting cannabis. And I'm starting to ask myself, are their magnesium levels balanced? Vitamin B, another value that I would recommend testing. Vitamin D, another value that I would recommend testing when it comes to sleep and overall health, right? Vitamin D is essential for hormone production. Vitamin D is essential for bone growth and immune system health. Vitamin B, your B vitamin panels, essential for energy production and for, if people suffer with nerve pain, neuropathies, numbness, and tingling in their hands and their feet that they've been self-medicating with cannabis for. Is this due to a B vitamin deficiency? And guys, if I'm seeing issues with magnesium, B vitamins, and D vitamins, again, I'm going to ask myself, is this due to lifestyle factors? Is this due to not going outside and getting sunlight? Could we correct this with nutrition, supplementation, or exercise? And I'll give you an example. Another value that we like to check frequently on males, especially if you're around the age of your 30s, even high 20s, is your total testosterone and your free testosterone. We'll check this in females too if we suspect like a PCOS condition. But let me give you a breakdown, and this is my personal blood work problems in my own. If I see low vitamin D levels, right, and I see low free testosterone levels, and I know vitamin D and testosterone play a major role with one another, I'm going to start to ask myself, and then I got to diagnose this. I have this of osteopenia, osteoporosis. We're saying now, wait a second. Here's the osteopenia, osteoporosis, probably caused from years of abusing caffeine and nicotine and stimulants and tobacco and all that, not sleeping, really unhealthy lifestyle, and some genetics. What's that caused from? Well, low testosterone. Okay, I have low free testosterone. What's that caused from? Maybe it's the lack of vitamin D production, my low vitamin D levels, which can also lead to osteoporosis and osteopenia. Well, what's causing low vitamin D? A lack of sunlight, right? If I was at work all day and then sitting inside and smoking weed all night, never getting outside, never taking care of my nutrition, never sleeping, here's the complete picture that we try and put together. So sorry for that little side tangent there, but I thought it was cool. That's how we assess people at our offices. We like to look at the complete picture when it comes to addiction recovery. Now, other values I like to get checked out, your T3, your T4, your T4 free, your T4 total, T3 free, T4 total, TSH, and then I like to check TPO. These are thyroid peroxidase antibodies that can be found on the thyroid. So this is common in autoimmune disease of the thyroid, Hashimoto's disease, perhaps there's goiter development. I like to check sometimes too, reverse T3, all your thyroid hormone levels. If I have someone who's dealing with fatigue and weight problems and energy issues, I want to know, what's their thyroid health look like? Have they been self-medicating with cannabis for a thyroid problem, or have lifestyle choices led to a thyroid disorder in this person that we now need to correct? So that's something that I like to look at. I always like to look at a urinalysis just to see if there's any type of bacterial infections, yeast infections, anything like that going on. Just a basic urinalysis with a dipstick. Uric acid is another big one I like to check. Uric acid can build up from poor dietary choices, and this often leads to conditions like gouty arthritis or gout development. Uric acid, if I notice high levels, this could be a nutrition modification that we could make. Perhaps there's a genetic predisposition to producing high levels of uric acid. And this is super important, guys. Look, if I got a person who has chronic pain that's been self-medicating with cannabis, I want to know, is there Lyme disease? Is there rheumatoid arthritis? Is there elevated uric acid levels? Is there hypercalcemia, elevated calcium levels in the blood? Because all of these things could lead to joint pain, and these could all be things that we could work on correcting, which would in the future lead to a prevention of relapse. We already talked about vitamin D, very important to get that tested. It's vital for hormone production. It's vital. If I see low vitamin D, I'm going to suspect low levels of melatonin as well too, low melatonin production, because vitamin D, generally speaking, we rely on sunlight to produce it. Same thing with melatonin. Melatonin builds up in our bodies throughout the day based on our daily exposure to sunlight. So if I see low vitamin D, we're going to be suspicious of that. And we talked about vitamin D is very important when it comes to things like seasonal depression and anxiety. So we want to make sure we have healthy vitamin D levels, and then vitamin B levels I discussed as well too. Now, in deeper levels of testing, those are all things you should talk to your doctor about getting. If you can't, call our offices. We'll work with you. If you're in New York State, we can order those blood panels for you. If you're not, we can find you somewhere where we can get those blood panels ordered. Now, hormone testing is another thing that I do enjoy talking about and looking into for people, especially when we are seeing symptoms ongoing past 120 days, past 90 days. Usually for hormone testing, I'll do some of it in the blood, but I do prefer saliva testing. We use Geneva Diagnostics or Geneva Diagnostics. They do saliva testing, and they're going to test total testosterone, free testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, DHEA levels, prolactin levels. They're testing everything, cortisol levels at 3 different points throughout the day, right? Cortisol plays a big role in things like adrenal fatigue and fat storage and weight gain. And we prefer to do saliva testing. I think when you look at the literature on it, it just seems like it's a better assessment than your blood. But, many times we'll do both. And those are tests that you guys can order right offline with some guidance. So if you have questions about blood work, if you found this informative, let me know in the comments below. Ask questions about your blood work. Ask questions about, what you should be getting or concerns that you have about your own. And I can make future videos on this topic. But you got to be subscribed and you got to ask the question in the comments in order for me to accomplish that. So I'll see you guys in the comments below.